my mortgage was killing me. I was paying $1,000 a month just in taxes. I joined a couple of Yahoo groups and found a couple of people that lived out here, and they connected me with somebody who had some land for sale. And I made a trip back out here and met the guy, and he took me around and showed me a couple of different tracts he had for sale, and I wrote him a check the next day.
Welcome to the Tiny House Lifestyle Podcast, the show where you learn how to plan, build, and live the tiny lifestyle. I'm your host, Ethan Waldman, and today's episode is a special one. Several years ago, I had the privilege of interviewing John Wells, a true pioneer in the tiny house movement. John first caught my attention through his insightful comments on my Facebook posts about building my own tiny house. And as I dug deeper into his profile, I realized he was the real deal. Someone who had fully embraced the off-grid minimalist lifestyle. While we initially decided not to release our conversation, recent events have changed my perspective. Sadly, I learned of John's passing through this month's Tiny House magazine, where he was mentioned as an early influence for Andrew and Laura. This news prompted me to revisit our interview, and I was struck by just how valuable and inspiring our discussion was. So I'm sharing it now. In this episode, we'll explore John's remarkable journey from living in a 2,800 square foot house to embracing life in a 128 square foot tiny home on the remote Terlingua Ranch in southwest Texas. John shares practical steps he took to make this dramatic transformation, offering a wealth of tips for anyone interested in off-grid living. From starting small with solar power to mastering essential wilderness skills, his story is both inspiring and instructive. We'll also hear about John's adventures and challenges, including how he managed a broken leg in the wilderness, a testament to his resilience and adaptability. Throughout our conversation, John's unique approach to simple living and his authentic personality shine through, providing invaluable insights for those considering a similar lifestyle change. Though recorded a while ago, John's wisdom remains as relevant and thought-provoking as ever. I believe it's time to share his experiences with our community, so today, I'm honored to present this never-before-released interview with John Wells. His story serves as a powerful example of embracing a truly minimalist, off-grid lifestyle surrounded by the beauty of nature. I hope you find John's journey as fascinating and inspiring as I did. Let's dive in. I am here with John Wells. After 18 years of living in New York City and 7 years in upstate New York, John got fed up with high taxes and being around so many people and decided to move to Terlingua Ranch in southwest Texas and try his hand at off-grid living. He has been there debt-free for 12 years and there is no going back. John Wells, welcome to the show.
Hey, Ethan. Nice to be here.
Great to have you. You know, I came across you when you commented on a different podcast episode of mine about Ariel, who's been living off-grid in Wyoming in a tiny house, and you said, I think I've been doing it a little bit longer. And I was like, as soon as I looked at your blog and your YouTube channel, I was like, oh, you've got to be a guest on the show.
Yeah, I don't know how I came across that video, but somebody had posted it, and I thought I'd just put in my 2 cents worth.
Yeah. So why don't we start with where do you live and why did you choose that particular location?
Okay, well, I moved to Terlingua Ranch in southwest Texas 12 years ago, and I chose this area primarily because the land prices are really cheap, the taxes are really low, and there's absolutely no building restriction. You can live in a cardboard box if you want to.
Awesome. And so when you say no building restrictions, you really mean like zero, nothing?
Well, there's one little restriction. If you live on 10 acres or less, full-time, you have to have a county-approved septic tank or a county-approved composting toilet.
Okay.
Otherwise, you can do what you want.
You can do what you want. And how much did this whole setup cost you, initially? I know over the years, you've added quite a bit, but just to give us a baseline, 12 years ago, to buy this land and build a little house.
Okay, I bought 40 acres for $8,000. And my little house cost me about another $8,000, including the solar and little details here and there. So 16 grand altogether on 40 acres, legally living on my own land in a small house.
Fantastic. There was a comment recently on your blog. I'm going to just read it because I think it's a great kind of framing for our conversation. And the commenter says, I watched Kristen Dirkson's documentary on YouTube, and I must admit I was quite impressed. I'm seriously considering making a similar move myself. I would love the chance to pick your brain about the lifestyle and the associated reality of such a bold decision. I'm a no-nonsense woman who doesn't want anything sugar-coated and regurgitated in an Instagram post. I'm interested in a full disclosure discussion about exactly what is needed to make this happen for myself. Now, I know, these podcast episodes are only about 40 minutes long or so, so we're not going to be able to, give this person the complete rundown, but I'm curious if we could start with just a rundown of what your setup consists of now, how you live, like what are your utilities? How are you getting water? Those kinds of things.
Okay. Well, I've got, about 1,200 watts of solar feeding my electric here, and that's primarily just to run my computer. I've got some other solar panels that just sort of run 12-volt systems like fans and lights. I built a huge greenhouse building, 1,600 square feet. Originally, it was going to be a greenhouse, but it turned out I'm a much better builder than I am a farmer, so it's kind of turned into a junkyard over the years, and I'm in a big push to clean that all out. But my little house here is my tiny house is 128 square feet, and all my rainwater is what I use for drinking. And I have capacity for 20,000 gallons of storage, and it only takes 6 inches of rain to fill that up. But I've never come close to even running dry since I got that all set up. So I've got plenty of water.
And does that rainwater collection happen just off the roof of your tiny house?
No, that's primarily off my greenhouse roof, which my house here gives me about 150 gallons per inch of rain, but my greenhouse gives me 1,500 gallons per inch of rain.
Yeah, the surface area of the roof is a helpful thing.
It certainly is, yeah.
So what does your kind of daily routine look like? I mean, do you have a daily routine?
Well, for the past year, I've actually had a daily routine. For a long time, I didn't really have one. I just kind of worked on whatever I felt like. But I started building a tiny house for a friend of mine a year ago, and I'm going to finish that in about a week, actually.
Fantastic.
That's going to, I'm kind of in a big push to get that all wrapped up. It's 304 square feet.
And is that on your ranch as well, or is that off-site somewhere?
It's on Terlingua Ranch, but his property is about a mile away from me. He has 80 acres.
Okay. So Terlingua Ranch isn't just limited to your 40 acres. It's a bigger swatch of land.
Correct. Yeah. Terlingua Ranch is actually 220,000 acres.
Okay.
And it got chopped up into 5 acre and 20 acre and 40 acre tracts back in the 70s, actually. And it was a group of investors that bought the ranch and chopped it up into all these little acreages and sold it off, trying to create a hunt park out here. But there's just not enough wildlife to sustain a hunt park. But, they made their money back selling all their tracts of land. And there's over 5,000 individual landowners out here.
Are there still tracts for sale?
Oh, there's plenty of land for sale out here. And there's a lot of tax delinquent land out here, too.
You can kind of pick it up probably for even cheaper.
Yeah, yeah.
When you bought it, was it sight unseen, or did you kind of scope out the area first and then make a decision?
Well, before I moved out here, I had actually met a couple who lived out here and corresponded with them. They built homemade wind turbines, and that's what got me interested in them. And they lived out here, and I came out and visited them in the spring of 2007, and just to check out the area a little bit. And then I went back to upstate New York and started thinking, I need to get out of here because my mortgage was killing me. I was paying $1,000 a month just in taxes.
Oh my.
I joined a couple of Yahoo groups and found a couple of people that lived out here, and they connected me with somebody who had some land for sale. And I made a trip back out here and met the guy, and he took me around and showed me a couple of different tracks he had for sale. And this was the best one that he had, and I wrote him a check the next day.
That's awesome. And how much time was there between you buying this piece of land and you kind of leaving your life in New York and starting this new life?
I had already sold my place in upstate New York before I decided where to go. And it was a couple of months after I'd sold my property that I packed everything up and headed out west and met this individual and bought the land. And then I took another month or two off in Phoenix visiting family, trying to figure out what I was going to do. And then I came back and just threw myself into it.
Nice. So it seems like you are, I guess it's fair to say you're in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah, that's true.
However, you've got seemingly a great internet connection. Are you able to get things like building supplies delivered, or are you having to drive hours to get basic supplies?
There's a building supply place up in Alpine, which is an hour away from me, and they deliver. So I get stuff delivered, and I can get Amazon and FedEx come right to my door, so I can get stuff next day sometimes, which is kind of crazy.
That is crazy. The long tentacles of Amazon reach us pretty much no matter where we are.
I love Amazon.
Yeah.
A lot of times people ask me, in all my years out here, what have I found the best way to sustain myself? And I say Amazon Prime.
Yeah. I mean, it does connect you and gives you a selection of stuff to buy should you want to buy it.
Right.
That you could get right in New York City.
Exactly.
Like you never left.
It's funny you use the word stuff, because there's an old bit by George Carlin, the comedian from years ago, about he talks about how people have their houses, and the only reason they have big houses is for all their stuff. And if you leave, you want to lock your stuff up so nobody will take it. And that's part of the trick to living in a tiny house is you can't have a lot of stuff unless you got another place to put it. And so, it's tough. My house in upstate New York was 2,800 square feet. And so I went from 2,800 square feet to 128 square feet.
I don't do public math, so I won't tell you what percentage reduction that is, but it's a lot.
It's a lot smaller.
So you mentioned that you're a better builder than a farmer. How are you getting your food? Are you homesteading, or you just grocery shop like the rest of us?
I grocery shop. I had quite an elaborate garden going for a while in my greenhouse. I had some fruit trees and plenty of greens and vegetables growing. But it did take a lot of time, and it took a lot of effort. And I decided, I broke my leg really badly about 5 years ago. And that led me to let the greenhouse sort of, turn into a junkyard. And I since have decided that the amount of calories and nutritional value I can produce on my own just doesn't balance out to the amount of time and effort I have to put into it. And they sell these things in grocery stores. They're called cans, and they have vegetables in them. And that stuff lasts forever, and it's pretty cheap. And so I've sort of gotten out of when I first came here, I was thinking I was really going to go for it and try to grow all my own food. And it just wasn't working out for me. And plus, I'm not that interested in farming. So I just kind of let that go by the wayside. I have one tomato plant, I have to say, that I got last year, and it's almost a year old. It's not producing any tomatoes right now, but it's still alive. And I'm going to try to keep it alive forever.
Nice. Well, maybe that could be a topic of your videos. Do you do a live stream every day?
I don't do a I used to do a live stream every day when I was feeding these wild cottontail rabbits that live out here, and I haven't done that for a while. But I do post videos to my YouTube channel twice a week, and I've been doing that for about 2 years, a little over 2 years now. And then of course I do my daily blog every day, and I've been doing that for every day for 11 years.
So that's a great way to either just tune in now and get a sense of what your life is right now, or I suppose you can go back to the very beginning and just read it in order and see what you did.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. A lot of people ask me silly questions about me, and I'll say, just read the blog. It's all there.
Right. It's a matter of finding the post that answers that question.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So when you broke your leg, were you able to continue living out there and maintaining the property, or did you have to leave for a period of time while you recuperated?
I stuck it out here. I had a compound fracture just above my ankle and both bones. And I was in the hospital for 2 weeks. And I'd say the first 2 months back here, it was pretty rough because I was in a wheelchair and couldn't get around, and I had to have people, take me to the store and help me out and stuff. And I hate like burdening people with that kind of stuff. I like to just do everything myself. But after about 2 months, I was able to drive again, although I used my left leg to push the pedals. But it was, like I said, it was tough the first 2 months. But after that, I kind of got into the scheme of things and stuck it out. I had really slow healing on my leg, so I was non-weight bearing for a full year. So I was in a wheelchair for most of that time, and then a whole nother year I was partially weight bearing, and it wasn't until 2 years that I could put full weight on it again.
Wow, that sounds pretty bad.
Yeah, it wasn't much fun, but I stuck it out. So
it sounds like that, in a way, crystallized your lifestyle because you had to let the garden and the greenhouse go, and then sounds like you kind of realized that you didn't really like doing it or want to do it anyway.
Yeah, pretty much. It kind of it was definitely a life-changing experience, and that kind of made me think about what I need to concentrate on. So I don't want to do it again, that's for sure.
Yeah. One thing that a lot of people who want to live tiny, and particularly those who want to live off-grid, one particular challenge is heating and cooling. Can you give us a rundown of how I'm guessing you need to cool your place a whole lot more than you need to heat it?
Right, yeah. Heating out here is not really an issue, although we've only had a high today of 44, and we had snow this morning, which happens like once a year. But cooling is a whole nother issue. And for the first, up until the time I broke my leg, I had built a 12-volt swamp cooler, which they only work in areas of low humidity. And I was able to live with it out here. And it was pumping in 20 to 25 degree cooler air from outside, just with running a little water through the pump system and the evaporator. But after I broke my leg, I got kind of soft, and I had to break down, and I bought a portable air conditioner that I use about 2 months out of the year in the hottest part of the summer.
So that's one of the ones I think most people aren't going to get to see this, but I can see behind you. I think I see that unit.
Yeah, it's right there above me on my left. I haven't put it away yet for the winter, but normally I pack it up and put it away.
Any reason you chose a portable rather than a window unit?
I actually had a window unit, but my windows are so small here, it wouldn't fit in any of them. So I just bought this portable one and hooked it up. That way I could vent it through anything.
Nice. Yeah, they're more adaptable in that way.
Yeah.
And how are you doing your cooking? Do you use wood? Do you use propane? What's your fuel?
Propane. I've got a little propane cooktop in my kitchen. And then I've got a gas grill that's outside that I cook stuff in. And I also have a solar oven that I built a few years ago. And that works pretty well. And even in the wintertime, as long as it's sunny. But in the summertime, it gets up to 450 degrees. So I can cook anything in that.
That's awesome. Yeah. I mean, you've got an abundance of sun there, so
Yeah.
might as well use it, right?
Yeah. And it's funny, I started off thinking I put up a bunch of wind turbines that I'd built and figured that would be great. And really the sun is a lot more reliable than the wind out here. And solar panels are relatively cheap now, and they don't blow up in high winds unless they're not anchored, of course. But it's all solar for me now.
Is there anything that you miss about being on grid?
I really can't think of anything. It's funny. Sometimes when I go to a hotel, like when I had my broken leg, I had to travel 3 hours once a month to go see my surgeon to check on my leg, and I'd stay in a hotel. And it always kind of amazed me. You could just flick a switch anywhere and not worry about anything, and lights were always on, and you had an unlimited supply of water. But I would say no, I don't really miss anything about on-grid living.
You are something of a self-described hermit. I think in the Kristen Dirksen documentary, you talked about how you wanted to be a hermit when you were a kid.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that's required to be successful in this lifestyle?
It is if you want to live in an area like I do, where there's not a whole lot of people around anyway. But, after living in Manhattan all those years, I've had enough of people, being around me all the time. And I'm perfectly happy just here. I've got a pet longhorn steer, and then a bunch of rabbits that live here, and then some javelina, which are some other animals that come around, and then there's a lot of wild burros that come here. So I always tell people I prefer the animals to the people.
Right, and yet you're pretty prolific online, and I would imagine that you end up interacting with a lot of people through your website.
Yeah, it's funny. If it wasn't for that, I would probably be really crazy by now. I'd be writing manifestos and stuff like that instead of corresponding with my blog readers and Facebook followers and stuff like that.
Sure. If you're willing to share, what does it cost you now per year to live there?
My expenses right now are running about $1,600 a month. And the big expense is my health insurance, which I pay for, which is crazy. And then feeding my stupid longhorn. He costs almost $300 a month to feed.
Wow.
So if I got rid of my health insurance and my longhorn, I'd be talking like, $10,000 a year, $1,000 a month, $12,000 a year.
That's awesome. Are there any taxes, property taxes where you are?
There are. Like I said, when I lived in upstate New York, I had a big farmhouse on 35 acres, and it was $12,000 a year, my property tax. Out here, I have 100 acres, and my tiny house and my greenhouse building, and I pay $400 a year.
That's amazing.
Yeah. Yeah, when I get my tax bill, I go in and pay it personally and just dance into the tax office. I'm happy to give them the money.
So are you, if you don't mind me asking, and feel free if you don't answer the question, that's fine. How do you make money?
I burned through a lot of savings when I first came out here, because I sold my house in upstate New York and made some pretty good money off of it. But I've been doing some odd jobs around here. And like I said, for the past year, I've been building a house for somebody. So that's been my income for this year. I sell merchandise for the Field Lab, my blog. Occasionally, I cast custom silver items and sell those occasionally. I have this T-shirt I'm wearing. I don't know if you can see it, but it's years ago that I kind of adopted, and the rancher actually gave her to me for my birthday one year, because she was 22 years old at the time and kind of sickly, and she just ended up staying here all the time. And I started a Facebook page all about her. And when she finally died, I sold $4,000 in T-shirts just to her fans. So,
wow,
that was called Operation Milk a Dead Cow.
That's great. Are the t-shirts still for sale, or was that a limited
No,
edition?
no, I haven't had any for sale lately. I had an online store for a while and sold some merchandise for my old rooster I had. I had an attack rooster here that was my buddy for a couple of years, and he finally died. So I have some coffee mugs and T-shirts that I used to sell for him, but I had a little trouble with the online store, so I kind of cut that out for now.
I'm sure you have people who get in touch and say, teach me. I want to learn. I want to learn how you do this. What do you tell them?
I tell them if they're going to come here, don't buy land sight unseen. Don't come here with just enough money to buy your property, because you're going to discover that you're going to have all kinds of expenses, and just and have some skills to be able to do things yourself, because our labor force out here is not that great. And a lot of people think just because they've watched a couple of videos they've got it figured out, and I tell them, it's a whole nother world when you live it for real.
Yeah, I'm curious, do you recommend, so like there are many people who I know who want to be doing maybe not exactly what you're doing, but do want to live off grid. Do you suggest that maybe they take it like one system at a time? Like try water harvesting, see what that's like. Try going one system at a time, or is it just better to kind of jump in?
It's funny you should ask that, because a lot of people will ask me, well, how much solar do I need? And that question's impossible to answer. And I tell them, if you want to experiment with solar, it's all modular. You can do 400 watts at a time. You can do 100 watts at a time, and you can add this amount of batteries or that amount of battery. And try just take your home office off the grid and go from there. And I still don't have a real good grasp on exactly how much wattage you need for everything. I just know that, like, when I started using my air conditioner, I already had an extra 400 watts of solar for it, and that wasn't enough. So I added another 400 watts, and that wasn't quite enough. So I added another 400 watts, and then I had more than I needed.
And how did you know it wasn't enough? Your batteries were running dead?
Well, I had a little meter that was telling me how many watts was coming in versus how many watts was getting sucked out.
Got it. So it was just more going out than what was coming in.
Exactly.
So you also on site have an Airstream guest house, correct?
It's an Airstream behemoth that I shouldn't have bought.
Oh, why not?
Well, I started gutting it. And this was another thing with my broken leg. I was just about ready to pull the shell off the trailer so I could repair the trailer when I broke my leg. And so it's still sitting out there. And, an Airstream is a whole nother ball of wax when you start to do that. I could build like 10 tiny houses in the time it would take me to fix that Airstream up. So it's just sitting out there.
There are no straight lines in the Airstream.
No.
I kind of compiled a list of some of the cool features you've got. A bike powered washing machine. Is that still up and running?
No, that was a long ago experiment. And
okay.
And I tried it out after I built it. That's when I was really gung ho about the whole off grid sustainable living thing. So that's why I built it. And I almost had a heart attack the first time I tried pedaling that thing. I used to ride bikes all over New York City when I was younger, and I hopped on that thing, and after 10 minutes, I was ready to just die. So it's sitting out in the field there, just gathering dust now.
Well, I suppose that's one benefit of being, kind of isolated. You're not going to piss off any neighbors leaving the bike washing machine in the front yard.
That's true. Out here, there's junkyards galore. People come out here and try to start something, and it's just horrible. In fact, I've been concentrating on all my extra stuff this year. I'm doing a series of videos this year. It's an hour a day of cleaning up, because it's so much to deal with in one shot. I figured an hour a day I can start dealing with it. And I found a guy who's going to build an adobe house. He's about 15 miles from me, and he's all gung ho, and he wants all my junk. So he's been coming back and forth and taking all my junk. And As soon as I can get rid of that, then I'll be a lot happier.
Yeah. Do you have a project lined up after you're done building this small house for your friend?
No, I don't specifically, although there's a number of people that have expressed interest in having me build a house for them. And to be honest with you, I'm going to take a couple months off because it's been a lot of work. I'm 60 years old and I'm not as young as I used to be, apparently.
Well, you're still doing it. Have you ever thought about taking like interns? I'm sure you could get some people to come and do all your work for you, and they could learn how to live the lifestyle.
You know, that I thought about that originally, but I really don't like having people around. So that wouldn't work out for me.
No.
And the funny thing is, when I first came here, I was thinking, I'm going to build this off-grid mecca and all these hot hippie chicks are going to come out to visit me. But it turns out my demographic is 50 to 60-year-old men who wish they could live like this, but their wives won't let them.
Have you had any copycats show up?
Not specifically. There's a couple of other off-gridders out here that are kind of high profile and really pushing it, but I don't really push it anymore. You know, I'm over the whole off-grid tiny house thing personally. You know, I live in a small house. I'm off the grid. It's like luxury camping.
Right. It's kind of like once you did it, you built the house, you set up the systems, and now you don't have to focus on them anymore. You can move on to how else you want to use your time.
Yeah, exactly. You know, I'm really not that interested in the whole off-grid thing because all my stuff works for me, and it's just like, you know, if somebody contacts me and wants to learn about it, I tell them what I know and tell them to go for it if they want to.
What's your motivation to keep sharing?
Well, the reason I started my blog years ago is because I'd always kept a daily diary, at least for the last 20 years before I came here. And then when I moved here, and it was actually 3 months before I got my phone and internet hooked up out here. And I decided, well, you know, I should do this blog thing instead of just doing my daily diary. And I do tell people that when they comment a lot on my blog, that it's really not a dialogue, it's just my diary. You know, if you want to comment, fine. And sometimes I'll respond, sometimes I won't. But originally it was just an extension of my daily diary, but now it's sort of become this thing to do. So I have something to report every day to stay productive. Because otherwise I'll just, you know, like most of the people in Terlingua, I'll just sit around and drink beer all day.
Right. So you have to start with coffee, and then you can move to the beer later in the day.
Yeah, we try not to do, you know, when I first came here, I kind of fell into the, you know, because, you know, I was just working on whatever and then drinking a lot of beer. And I decided, you know what, there's enough drunks out here. So I kind of cut that back quite a bit. And now I just do what I have to do and then relax in the evening.
Nice. What are some things that maybe surprised or delighted you that you didn't expect, but you're happy with your lifestyle?
Well, there's something actually to the reverse of that. And what I miss is, you know, when you work a 9-to-5 job, you've got your weekends and your 2 weeks vacation every year that you really look forward to. And I kind of miss that because I don't have weekends or 2-week vacations I need to look forward to because I can take a little break whenever the hell I want.
It's interesting. It's almost like you miss the limitations because it makes when you get that time off, when you get that freedom, it's so sweet. But when you have it all the time, it's less interesting.
Exactly. Yeah. It's kind of, you know, I've become a jaded, I don't know how you'd say that, a jaded vacationer now. I kind of miss that. Because when I was working full time, man, I loved those weekends and I loved those 2-week vacations. But you know, that's kind of gone now.
Have you found any way to kind of spark that joy again?
Spark that joy, yeah.
That's a very very of our times question.
Yeah, exactly. I suppose. Well, you know, I'm always coming up with something new to like try out. Like I tried powered paragliding a few years ago. But after I broke my leg, I didn't want to hurt myself again, so I gave that up.
Is that how you broke your leg?
No, it was on a ATV. And the funny thing is, when I broke my leg, I disappeared from my blog for 2 weeks, and people were following it, and I was posting every day, and everybody figured I broke my leg on my paramotor, and it was just a silly little ATV accident. And so that's out of the picture now, and I'm kind of into clocks now. So I've been building clocks. I have a 3D printed clock I made, and then I have another one that was all laser cut parts out of thin plywood that I put together, and I've got an electronic one I'm going to start putting together soon. But it's got little tiny pieces you got to solder in. So I told my client who I'm building the house for, I won't start that until I finish your house.
Do you have a laser cutter out there?
I don't have a laser cutter out here, but I do have a 3D printer that I pretty much mastered a little over a year ago.
Cool.
And I'm probably going to do a little more solar baking later this summer. Last year, before I started building this house, or the year before that, I was doing a lot of solar baking, and I was selling cookies and bread and stuff that I was making. I even mastered croissants, which is not an easy thing to do. And so I'm going to get back into the solar baking again this summer.
Cool. And where is it that you're selling it? Are you bringing them? Is there like a farmer's market? Is there any kind of local community where you live?
There is a farmer's market out here, but I don't really go down there too much. Like I said, I don't really like being around people anymore. And so I don't go down to the farmer's market. And I just sell locally here. People come out here to, legally you can't ship the goods. And I forget what the term is for it, but there's a term for a home kitchen, and you have to pass this test on cleanliness and all that. Clean your fingernails. That's what you have to do. But I was just selling locally, just pretty much through my Facebook page to locals out here.
Nice. How far is that grocery store where you're shopping for food?
The big grocery store is 65 miles from here, but there's actually a pretty good grocery store south of me that's only 18 miles away.
Have you experimented with getting food delivered through Amazon or through anything else?
Yeah, when I had my broken leg, I had a lot of my food delivered here. But I kind of prefer to get stuff a little, some fresh stuff as opposed to stuff that's just in a can all the time.
Yeah, it's definitely nice to taste the freshness.
Yeah.
So one thing that I like to ask all of my guests is what are 2 or 3 resources, and I mean like books or YouTube people or websites that helped you out while you were kind of on this journey that you would like to share with our listeners?
Well, I was already a pretty good carpenter before I came out here, so I didn't have to source anything as far as how to build a small space, because it's really not rocket science unless you're building it on a trailer like the traditional tiny house. And I just used my skills, and part of my skill set I used for this particular house were my set building skills. I built sets in Manhattan for a number of years, and so I built the panels for my house basically like I was building a set. And I assembled all the panels. There were 20 panels altogether, 4x8 panels. And it took me about 6 days to assemble all those panels. It took me 1 day to assemble the basic box. And I moved in after 6 days. And then it took another 2 or 3 months to do all the finish work. But I had a secured living space within a week.
It's interesting. You almost built tips. I mean, they're not sits,
yeah,
but
that's what I was kind of thinking as I was building these. And although they weren't insulated yet, but they were basically just 4x8 panels with a couple of structural 2x4 members. And I sort of fit them so they were all kind of the outer OSB was kind of overlapped, so they would all fit together and screw together. And then I threw in some insulation after that.
Cool. Has there ever been a moment or an event that made you think, I'm going to just be done with this all? Like, screw it, I'm going home?
Probably the first week after I broke my leg, I was kind of thinking things through a little bit more. But other than that, Absolutely not. I can't even imagine living in a big house again. When I was a little kid growing up, even then, I was thinking, why do we have a dining room that we only use like once a week or once a month? And why do we have the formal living room that I'm not even allowed to go in? And all that space, just as a kid, that never made sense to me. And when I was little, me and my friends used to like to build forts and stuff. And I always thought, this is all I need. It's just this tiny little like thing to stay in. So no, I don't really miss anything.
Well, I think that's a good place to end it. John Wells, thank you so much for being a guest on the show today and for just your open and honest answers to everything.
My unlimited wisdom.
Your unlimited wisdom. I look forward to continuing to follow your journey. Where can people find you?
Okay, well, I do actually, if you do a Google search for John Wells, the Field Lab, you'll come up with everything you could possibly want to know about. And that'll get you there.
All right. Well, thanks so much, John. I appreciate it.
Okay, thanks, bro.
Thank you so much to John Wells for being a guest on the show today. You can find the show notes for this episode, including a complete transcript, links, and resources at thetinyhouse.net/302. Again, that's thetinyhouse.net/302. If you enjoyed this conversation and found value in it, please take a moment to follow the Tiny House Lifestyle podcast and to share this episode with anyone who you think might benefit from it. Your support helps us continue to bring you inspiring stories and practical advice for your own tiny living journey. Well, that's all for this week. I'm your host, Ethan Waldman, and I'll be back next week with another episode of the Tiny House Lifestyle Podcast.